So I'm just curious, like on your perspective of Iran's nuclear bomb project. There's a lot of media coverage, particularly recently when Trump ordered the attack of the three nuclear facilities in Iran, and then they say, "Oh, Iran is like only weeks away of getting the nuclear bomb. It's like maybe 9 or 10 nuclear bombs, and then Israel may be wiped out by Iranian military force." Do you think that argument hold water? Like, do you think Iran is really pushing for a nuclear bomb?
I mean, as long as there was monitoring under
Hmm.
the Obama agreement, there was no way Iran could get near a nuclear bomb.
Hmm.
So once that agreement was scrapped by Trump, Iran's position was then we'll enrich higher
Hmm.
level. I think it was more of a bargaining position, saying,
Gotcha.
come back to the agreement, otherwise we'll enrich more and more.
Hmm.
Uh, but of course, by enriching more and more, you're getting closer to making in theory, to the position where you can make a bomb.
Hmm.
Uh, so withdrawal from the agreement actually then started this process of escalation with the present situation now that they think that by bombing actually the facilities, they're going to solve the problem.
But I don't think that's the case, right? Like if you think about it, the Iran government, as long as there's no regime change, they can rebuild those facilities. They can build it in the past. They have the technology, they have the capabilities. It's just like delayed that situation. And now I think from the Iran's perspective, they have more reason to get a nuclear bomb. Like look at North Korea, like they got a nuclear bomb. Like America never kind of go to bomb them nowadays.
No, and also actually, I mean, the problem has become much more serious because
Hmm.
there's clearly the Iranians have taken measures to disperse ever since there was talk of bombing
Hmm.
the facilities. They've dispersed their nuclear, basically, technology.
Hmm.
We don't know how many places. So the president, before you knew exactly where the enrichment was, where the installations were, they could be monitored.
Yeah.
Now, the question is if it's dispersed, then it becomes like the Iraqi situation.
Yeah.
The US will demand, in fact, to have the right to inspect anytime, anywhere they want. And
Hmm.
Iran's a big country. They're going to run around from one place to another, inspecting to make sure there's no secret places.
Hmm.
The obvious logic of that, I'm not sure if Trump wants to admit it, that is total occupation of the country of the size of much of Europe of 90% population.
Yeah,
It becomes basically a nightmare.
I
Uh,
know.
but I think they haven't thought about that. They think I think the Israelis had convinced Trump that a strike, a surgical strike, getting rid of those installations is going to end the problem, and maybe it will lead also to change of the regime. I
Yeah,
think it'll actually strengthen the regime and
yeah.
create a problem much worse than it was before.
Yeah. So I think like right now there's some popular conspiracy theory saying that Trump and the Iran supreme leaders they actually collude to kind of put on the show. The US kind of put three bomb those three locations and then they gave a heads up to the Iran military force and say, hey, we're gonna bomb these three locations. You guys better evacuate. And then the Iran just like pull out all this Iranian uh, materials and then they kind of conserve all those technology then both sides kind of show save some face. The America say we are only bombing those facilities. We give Bibi Netanyahu some answer, see we bomb those locations and Iranian can still keep those technology. Do you think that conspiracy theory has any ground?
It gives too much credit for decision makers. I mean, sometimes early American presidents had actually good sayings. One saying from Quincy was that the most underestimated force in human history is human stupidity.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, he meant general, basically stupidity in the population, but obviously the ordinary people in the street don't make policy. It's the people
Yeah.
at the top who make policy. And one should never underestimate their stupidity. I think a conspiratorial theories often start on the premise that people at top are wise. They might be mean-spirited or have devious purposes, but they know what they're doing and they've
Yeah.
calculated their basically cards and they know what was going to happen. And if you do that premise, much of history, then it's not explainable. I mean,
Yeah, I can see your answer to this question. I'm just curious about like, there's some critics of the Iran government. They say like, oh, the Iranian is behind the Hamas in Israel and also, attacking the Israel in October 7th. They are behind, Lebanon, all the Houthis militias in Iraq like try to attack Israel. And Israel government actually have to defend. They kind of get rid of all those, parties kind of funded by Iran government, and now it's a chance to kind of really retaliate on Iran's mainland. Do you think that's a reasonable critics, or do you think there's more complex situation behind this?
well, there's no question that Iran has helped the uh, Houthis, the Hezbollah, and the militias in Iraq. Not sure about how much help Iran had given to Hamas. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
Qatar probably gave much more help to Hamas than Iran. But
Hmm.
again, those links are often exaggerated. The
Hmm.
problem Israel has is not really shouldn't be Iran. The problem Israel has is with the Palestinian issue.
Hmm.
And they don't want to deal with that issue. So
Yeah.
a way of distracting from that issue is somehow to blame a third party as being the cause of it. And again,
Mm.
this is a replay of Iraq,
Hmm.
because if you go back to that time, the Israeli position was that, the Palestinian issue could be solved if there was no Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein was behind the Palestinian insurrections, revolts, and if we get rid of Saddam Hussein, we'll change the whole scene in the Middle East, and the Palestinian problem would be solved. There will be no Palestinian problem.
Hmm.
Well, they got rid of Saddam Hussein, but the Palestinian problem is still there.
Still
So
there. Yeah,
now
exactly.
they're arguing that it's Iran that is
Yeah.
the cause of it. If you
Yeah.
get rid of Iran, somehow the Palestinian issue would be resolved.
Yeah. I think Benjamin Netanyahu, I don't know if you read, there's a document prepared by the think tank, working on his team. It's called the Clean Break. So it's basically published in 1996. It's guiding the Benjamin Netanyahu's policy towards Mid East, other countries adjacent to Israel. And there are two countries kind of particularly mentioned in that document. One is Iraq, the other is Iran. So basically, after that, he started to, kind of repeating his talking point that Iran is going to like weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon, is going to like be months away of be able to shoot those nuclear bombs into United States. And he said that in 1996, he said that in 2002, and he said that in 2015, 2013, 2012, 2018, and recently. So do you think like that kind of narrative, that kind of agenda is what's the real force behind the current Iran situation?
Yeah, I'm sure that's a sort of argument that uh, Trump could be taken in by. I mean,
Yeah.
um, again, you know. Iran does have this slogan, death to Israel. So that's
Mhm.
often amplified in
Exactly.
Washington. But someone like Obama could actually, is much more realistic. He
Mhm.
knows that Iran has actually implicitly or indirectly accepted a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine.
Exactly.
And that's never mentioned actually
Mhm.
publicly. So if they wanted to basically deal with Iran, they could accept what they Iranian official position, which
Mhm.
is a two-state solution. Instead, they prefer to look at what is the slogans in the street of death to Israel.
Mhm.
So this fits into, the Israeli paranoia that somehow Iran is out to get them because of the
Yeah.
slogans. But they could very well look at the fact that Iranian presidents have gone on record saying that they will accept a two-state solution if the Palestinians accept it. And in fact, the Saudi
Mhm.
solution, Saudi is as close friend as the United States as possible. The Saudi solution is a two-state solution. The
Mhm.
American position until Trump came along was always consistently a two-state solution.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
So
I mean,
go ahead.
there are people in Iran. I mean, Ahmadinejad was one of them, the president, who talked about Israel shouldn't exist and so on, and giving an ultra, basically extremist position on
Mhm.
Israel.
Mhm.
But 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 the official line has always been basically softly spoken but important that this two-state solution is a feasible solution.
Yeah, I kind of find it interesting because like I know in the Western media always portray Iran's government as those irrational, authoritarian and like really don't know what they're thinking about and they could take very radical move. But from the observation, the Iranian government actually be very pragmatic and realistic in their foreign policy. Do you agree with that observation? That's at least like something I observe like through my watching this news.
Well, I think yes. If you look at it at the official line, not in the polemics and what demonstrations. Yeah, I think the line, even with Ahmadinejad, while he was denying the genocide
Hmm.
and so on, which fed into Israeli paranoia. Even at that time, the leader had his own men talking to Obama in Oman.
Hmm.
So that was a quiet diplomatic, basically, uh, give and take in Oman. While in Tehran there was this conference about the genocide never occurred, or Holocaust never
Yeah,
occurred.
yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, Professor, from your perspective, um, do you think from the like when you look at the JCPOA that happened in 2015, right? We know that Benjamin Netanyahu is against that deal. We know that GOP senates are against that deal under the influence of Israel lobby. Are there any like parties or like intellectuals in Israel actually in support of that deal?
Uh, yes, they were actually. You have to look at your Haaretz and so on. And of
Hmm.
course, the more liberal Israeli academics are no longer actually in Israel. They're in the diaspora.
Hmm.
So someone like Avi Shalim, who left Israel, uh, I'm sure he supported the deal. You would find actually academics or experts who would have accepted it. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually listened to a podcast. Like, there's a kind of expert kind of talking about at that time. There's some, left wing, left wing intellectuals in Israel actually support that deal. They think like if you really want the peace in the Middle East, you want the safety environment around Israel, you should just take that deal and then just adhere to
Yeah,
it. Like
yeah.
Iran will be kind of constrained in their nuclear capabilities moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trouble is it's between people who know the stuff, the
Hmm.
materials, details, and the general public, of course, in Israel is very much influenced by the fear and the history of the Holocaust.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when Iranian president sort of denies the Holocaust and then talks about Israel shouldn't exist, and then you bring in the topic of nuclear technology,
Yeah, I know.
the result is, of course, you can't trust Iran. This is too dangerous a situation, and
Hmm.
don't take any risks. So the Netanyahu line becomes very popular.
Hmm. So I actually looking at the Twitter, Rubio said now U.S. or the Mid East is safer than yesterday after like U.S. bombed those three locations, and President Trump was calling for a peace deal after he took that initiative. Do you think that's reasonable? Do you think that based on your understanding of the Iran government, do you think they will just like surrender and then come to the table to negotiate, or are they going to take some measure to retaliate?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, if the US also in negotiations says they were willing to accept Iran's nuclear technology and enrichment, but with verifications, i.e., going back to the Obama deal. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
they'll say it's a new deal, a better deal, but
Yeah.
basically it's the same as the Obama deal. I think Iran would be more than happy to accept.
Okay.
Uh, but I don't think Iran needs to escalate the situation by hitting the United States. All
Hmm.
they have to do is sit tight now because there's more of a danger for Israel and the United States because they don't now know where all the facilities are, where all the enriched uranium is.
Exactly. So I see like the US stand, at least like what they tell the media is like we don't seek for regime change in Iran. Now I got confused because if you don't change the regime in Iran, how do you make sure they do not pursue nuclear bomb? Now they can just hide, in some unknown locations and then they don't have to follow any rules. They can just do
Yeah,
whatever they want. And you
yeah,
cannot prevent that.
yeah. I mean, even if there's a change of regime, the U.S. would and Israel would still want inspections at any time, any place, and
Yeah.
is going to have a problem, basic problem with any any regime. The only way they can have a regime that will accept that is if U.S. and Israel actually occupy Iran and impose on Iran a new regime.
Regime. Yeah, and also I think that's gonna be really problematic not only for Israel but for US because I don't think the US current government and the current national situation allow for that kind of initiative. Iran is like three times the size and like more population than Iraq. Look at how much US government spent on the Iraq war. Like it's like three over 3 trillion and more to be accumulated. And I can say like the current debt problem the US government face is partially due to that Iraq war.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be a stupid thing to do, but presidents in the past have done stupid things, so I wouldn't discount it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think before that, they might do massive bombing elsewhere with the hope that somehow the regime will collapse and there will be an uprising, which
Mhm.
again, they might think that that will happen, but I don't see that in the books.
Yeah. So I think like right now, do you think there could be a peaceful resolution like through diplomacy, like through multilateral, like China, Russia, Europe get involved as well? Basically, you kind of go back to that Obama deal, timeout framework. But seems like right now, from my conversation with you, for Iran's position, they definitely want to keep that capability of doing uranium enrichment. But for the US and Israel position, that's a no-no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's enough flexibility or uh, basically uh, desire on the behalf of either Netanyahu or Trump to actually avoid escalation.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, the idea that Trump is actually a peace politician just doesn't fit into his personality. I mean,
Yeah.
campaigned on the issue of peace, but that's basically a trope for anyone running for presidency.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't see anything in his past or personality that he would be shy of actually going into a war.
Hmm.
Um, After all, remember, he told the chiefs of staff in Pentagon, what's the point of having all these sophisticated weapons if you're not willing to use them?
Yeah, I kind of see that. Like he is kind of proud, really proud of this B-2 bomber kind of destroys three locations in Iran, like yesterday, at least I from his Twitter
Yeah.
message. Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what do you think the end game here in this? Because apparently, from Israel and US perspective, their ultimate goal is not reachable by simply bombing Iran. Like they can just repeat this bomb like three times more. They are not going to destroy the capabilities of Iranians to enrich the uraniums.
Well, I mean, I think, if Iran has actually basically spread around its enriched materials and there has enough basically secret places, and they do have the manpower and the expertise to eventually build a bomb. I think it's going to be a very sort of tense situation in the future
Hmm.
of whether Iran is actually now building a bomb or not building a bomb.
Yeah.
Something that didn't have to happen before or was actually basically prevented by the Obama agreement.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think like actually the best choice, the US, if we have a time machine, we should go back to 2018 and prevent Trump from withdrawal from that agreement. And then there's gonna be no crisis nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, it's sort of a stupidity in that, short-term gain is always has to be judged by long-term costs. It was
Mm.
short-term gain for Trump was, public support in denouncing that agreement.
Yeah.
Uh, but the long-term cost is, he should have thought, what's the alternative? What's the end game in this if you don't
Mm.
have an.
Yeah, I just don't think right now his cabinet members and him has that capability of really thinking the long term. I think he caught, from my perspective, I think he caught off guard by Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to attack Iran. Because if you look at the first announcement from Rubio, he said, "Oh, U.S. is not involved in this decision of attacking Iran." And then later, Trump came out and say, "Oh, I approve that. I'm kind of on the winning party.
Yeah.
You know, he want to be a winner." But then you see this kind of contradicting narratives, like from Marco Rubio and Trump's Twitter. So it's really confusing. But I see there's not a coherent strategy. It's not really some like the decision comes after some kind of long-term thinking and weighing the pros and cons. It's more impulsive, and unfortunately, it's kind of under the influence of the foreign parties like Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
I mean, the people surrounding Trump are basically servants of Trump.
yeah.
So
So
they
yeah, go
will
ahead.
fall in line.
Yeah,
It's unlike his first peer administration, where actually people actually opposed the agreement and held on to their own views of what was happening.
yeah,
This time, basically, you have an echo chamber.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
they're going to follow whatever he says, and he seems to follow Netanyahu's position.
Yeah. I actually like I don't know if you recently watched Tucker Carlson's show. Like he interviewed Ted Cruz, and that interview is really good. Like I don't know if you watched that recent episode.
No, I don't watch actually much media.
Okay. Actually, I highly recommend that because in that show, Tucker Carlson had a clean break from Ted Cruz. So basically, Tucker Carlson questioned Ted Cruz's premise of attacking Iran. He said, like, do you know how much population in Iran? And Ted Cruz couldn't came up with that answer. And then Tucker Carlson asked again, like, do you know what's the ethnic composition in Iran? Like, what kind of races are in Iran? Ted Cruz couldn't say that.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson is actually in the MAGA world, but now he is kind of trying to break away from that position of starting a war in Iran because there's certain part of the MAGA coalition that do not want any more wars. And apparently Trump had break his promise when he kind of campaigned for the presidency. And I think those voters will become, disillusioned with Trump administration and could change a lot of things, in the upcoming midterm elections.
Well, except for, once if there is some sort of accidental blow up of American ship or something,
Mhm.
I don't think the Iranian government will want to do it. But if it was done, then, that its emotions there become very erratic.
Yeah, it will be Iraq war again,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so unfortunate because if you kind of read the history, basically what the Trump administration and all the right-wing media trying to do is recycle some of those talking points happened in 2002 2003 timeframe that when they try to invade Iraq, and they basically tell the same thing. Iranian is kind of holding this massive uh, destruction weapons and like the nuclear weapons. They're
Yeah.
months away, and they're going to throw it in United States. It's too late when you see that nuclear smoke coming out, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so unfortunate. But actually, I think that conversation between Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson shows you how little Americans or even the world know about Iran.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm surprised actually that Tom Cruise knew so little. I would have thought he would have had some education, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, like the Tucker Carlson argument is like if you try to talk about like overthrow a government, overthrow a regime, do a regime change in Iran, at least you should know how many people they have, right? Like you don't know anything about Iran, the country you try to overthrow their government.
No, I mean, the ignorance actually in higher levels of American society are tremendous.
Yeah.
I
So
was
actually,
once I was once talking to uh, you know a high-ranking judge. I
mhm.
won't mention names, but high-ranking judge who was actually one time uh, considered for the Supreme Court.
Wow.
He tried to convince me that ISIS, the one of the eyes in ISIS,
Mhm.
the extreme Sunni group that was fighting in Iraq,
Mhm.
one of the eyes stood for Iran. I kept on saying, no, actually, Iranian militia are there working with the United States to fight ISIS.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
his knowledge, I think, of Middle East was from Fox News.
Yeah, I know. And I think like recently, I mean, I may fall into that as well. Like people kind of easily become biased towards a country based on the narrative, based on all the propaganda in the mainstream media. I actually know very little about Iran. I just thought, oh, Iran is like a country kind of run by extreme, religious group, and they kind of limit the human rights. They limit women's decisions to kind of wear whatever they want. They used to be relative open pro-Western country, bear with monarchy government structure, and they got overthrown. But after I read your book, I kind of see it's a more nuanced situation. And actually, I want to know a little bit more about the current Iran country, right? I know you wrote a really great book about the modern Iran, right? So I'm going to actually make some videos about that book as well. But I want to hear from your voice, like how does the current Iran country looks like education level, like the middle class, what people really want in the country. Just give me some broad overview, kind of correct some of my biases on Iran.
Well, what you've seen actually since the 79
Hmm.
is, all the problems and all the weaknesses of the Islamic Republic.
Hmm.
There's been a massive expansion of educational system,
Hmm.
especially higher education. So in some ways, it's like in China, you've had a huge university expansion, a number of
Yes.
graduates. And
Yes.
this has actually created a large, I would say, educated middle class
Hmm.
with a lot of problems because they have to have jobs and so on.
Hmm.
But also, this middle class doesn't want to be told by clerics what to think or what to do and so on.
Exactly.
Women, they want to dress the way what they want. They don't want some guy in a turban to tell them how to appear in public. So there's been I would say, the modern desire for individual rights
Hmm.
has become much more prominent as time has gone on, partly because of what the regime has done, but inadvertently expanding educational system has
Hmm.
created its own problems.
So,
And there might be some parallels with China on that.
yeah, I know. I'm just curious, like, why did the regime try to kind of expand the higher education? Because, like, if you know, you try to be a religious country, you may want your citizens be as dumb as possible. Like they're going to be following the rules and more, how to say, have less of their own opinions.
Well, I mean, I think the clerics thought that if you educate people, especially when you have Islamic education, people will be produced as believers like themselves,
Uh-huh.
not realizing that you can be believed, but you have a different interpretation of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Uh,
actually that become a kind of a problem nowadays in the modern Iran, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean
So
that's where actually when people say, well, uh, Mossadegh's image is too basically flattering. It's the reason he fits into the present is much of his aspirations fit into the modern aspiration of individual rights.
gotcha. Yeah, actually, I think like if he's kind of, the leader nowadays in Iran, that would be a completely different story.
Yeah, I mean, at times when there's been elections, people who really have fitted into his image have actually won landslide victories, like
Hmm.
Khatami,
Yeah.
President Khatami.
Yeah.
Uh, Although he was a cleric, his basically campaign resonated with people because it sounded like he was talking the same language as the Mossadegh period.
Yeah. So I'm just curious about the current modern Iran, right? So, like there's a lot of saying, you see like the Israel precision attack on the military leaders. They say like there's a lot of Iranian who are actually, spying for Mossad from Israel or like working for CIA. Do you think that's a reflection of the internal grievance toward the current regime? That kind of causing that so many people actually kind of feeding the information to the foreign agencies.
Um, well, I think the Mujahideen,
Hmm.
once they were suppressed, there's a lot of blood between them and the regime because so
Hmm.
many of their members were executed in 82.
Hmm.
So they basically moved whole scale to um, Iraq and cooperated with the Iraqis
Hmm.
invading Iran. And so they lost credibility in Iran because they were seen as, collaborators with Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
They still have a structure,
Hmm.
and I suspect some of the assassinations and information that Mossad gets is
Hmm.
from the Mujahideen organization.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So it's not like your middle class citizens elites that kind of voluntarily to work for other like CIA or Mossad. It's actually like previously existing infrastructure are still working.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Okay.
sure the Mossad also, I mean, like any espionage organization, tries to buy people, especially diplomats who are abroad, uh,
Hmm.
tries to buy them, and maybe use arguments about, how bad the regime is. Why don't you collaborate with us and we'll bring democracy? So you
Hmm.
could get to one or two of those. But I think the main infrastructure of the Mossad is remnants of the Mujahideen.
Gotcha. So do you think, I mean, I saw the Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was like, advocating, speaking to the Iranian people and say, hey, you guys should rise up. You should, do a regime change. And we, Israel and the United States will support you. And they were calling for the Iranian people to kind of rise up to do uprising like, 1953 or 1979, do a similar thing. Do you think how likely do you think that will happen? Like the people will kind of rise up and then try to kind of overthrow the current government.
Well, I think the best way of unifying the country is actually bombing the country. Uh,
So you think they were going to rally behind the current government then?
well, yeah, more likely.
Hmm.
And there's a famous quotation from Goebbels,
Hmm.
Hitler's right-hand man. He said that the German public was never more united behind the Nazi regime than when the Allies started dropping bombs on them.
I gotta see that kind of similarity nowadays. Even though
Yeah,
they don't like the current regime, they don't they dislike the foreign country interference even more.
yeah, and especially they don't like to be bombed.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah. So,
and also, it's practical terms. Once you have a national crisis like this,
mhm.
it's in some ways it strengthens any government, however despicable the government is, because they can always use the argument that anyone who's criticizing us, not stepping in line, is actually an agent of Mossad or the CIA.
Yeah, I
So
think
it
that's
actually it silences opposition, and many people who are critical of the regime and have been critical in the past are more likely to actually keep their criticisms private because they feel that any open criticism would be actually unpatriotic.
yeah. So I definitely agree your argument. I think like that happens same thing in United States. Like when you look at Bush's first term, his rating is not great, and after 9/11, he got like really high ratings, and then he kind of want to invade Iraq, and like his rating keep going up. Then the truth about the Iraq war comes out, and his rating kind of plunges. But like that takes time.
Yes.
So, Professor, I know you are you working on a new book about the 1979 coup or
Uh,
revolution?
yeah, I'm actually sort of looking at the new documents again, mostly British and American
Mhm.
documents from the 1953 on, uh, trying to answer why the revolution happened or why the old regime sort of collapsed so quickly.
Hmm.
And the arguments basically are an extension of what I said earlier. I think the question of legitimacy is at
Yeah,
the core of the issue.
yeah. So I got another audience question about like, ingredients of the authoritarian resilience, right? So his question is like, when you look at Iran and China, they both have confounded prediction of the imminent collapse. Like the Western media have saying, oh, Iran's and China's model are not sustainable. But in your study of the modern Iran, what factors like economic performance, ideological control, coercive capacity, elite participation, or something else most decisively enable an authoritarian state to endure? And what do you see the hidden vulnerability of the seeming, like monolithic regimes?
Well, it depends what time you're looking at. I mean, I
Hmm.
think in 79, 80, the regime had a great deal of support legitimacy.
Hmm.
So at that time, the expectation was, well, these, clerics, they don't know how to run a government. They go there for a short term. And
Hmm.
Saddam Hussein, when he invaded Iran, he thought the whole Iran would collapse because the revolution was chaotic. In fact, the country rallied behind it. So
Hmm.
at that time, there was what resistance was from legitimacy and popular support.
Hmm.
As time has gone on, that support has withered
Hmm.
clearly.
Yeah.
Uh, but that doesn't mean it's completely disappeared. There's still people who have great admiration for the revolution, for Khomeini and aspirations. They're far less now than they were before. But instead, the regime has built up institutions,
Hmm.
especially the Revolutionary Guards,
Yeah.
that gives it a lot of strength.
Okay.
Uh, So, I mean, the regime would have been better off actually if it had been more open, pluralistic,
Yeah.
and had performed economic miracles like China.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that would have made it a very strong state.
Yeah.
But it didn't do that. It preferred to actually become narrower, but more solid, and then considered itself more stable if it had a very solid, even narrow basis.
Hmm.
And because of it, it's basically the foreign policy of opposition to United States. The economic miracle was never performed.
I think the general question would be like, why didn't Iran kind of just completely forge a more tighter relationship with China, maybe an alliance with China, so they can he can better protect himself nowadays, like in this kind of situation. So I think Iran's relationship with China was kind of, I don't know how to evaluate. I'm not an expert on that, but like there's some kind of obstacles in that.
Well, I mean, I think the Chinese national interest
Hmm.
would be to actually not to get embroiled in conflicts.
Hmm.
So, for China to actually offer a defense agreement with Iran would not be in the Chinese interest. So I don't think
Gotcha.
they would do that. Uh,
Gotcha.
and I don't know if the Iranians have even ever thought of that, but they they thought that by uh, they're having a more uh, pro Russian Chinese policy, they could in fact counter American pressure. Uh,
Yeah.
but they were talking long-term basis, but saying, well, there's a shift in international power
Hmm.
from the West to the East. And by being pro-China, pro-Russian, we're basically following history.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
but that denies the fact that, United States and Israel have a great deal of still military power uh,
yeah.
to devastate the country, and
Yeah.
that there is no basically international umbrella to protect Iran from the West.
Hmm. So do you think I would say the do you think the Iran government actually tried to stay independent? Like, like what Mossadegh was trying to do in 1953. They don't want to go along with any power. And in fact, if you see Russia, they actually participated in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. So from Russia's perspective, they don't want Iran to have nuclear weapon as well. Do you agree with that kind of judgment?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the successes of Obama was to be
Hmm.
able to get actually Russia as well as other Europeans to come along with their policies.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, and Iran's policy has always been neither East or West,
Yeah.
and that was much more, you can say, consistent in the past. But in the last couple of years, it's been more towards East rather than West.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
And I mean, also there was expectation that when Obama pulled out of the agreement, the
Hmm.
Europeans would step in and
Hmm.
actually work with Iran. Even though I think European governments were willing to do that, they discovered that the European oil companies, any business company,
Hmm.
were fearful of antagonizing the United States in
Gotcha.
secondary sanctions.
Yeah.
So Iran basically lost the confidence that Europe could be a counterbalance and
Yeah.
pushed them into much more being appearing more pro-American, pro-Russian and pro-Chinese. But I think that it was clear in Iran that, China and Russia was not actually going to give militarily protection to Iran.
I don't think so either. So, like, I think the Chinese government policy is like not to get involved in any of this conflict. It's just
Yes.
like they don't want to kind of stand aside and then get pulled into war. I think they have their own geopolitics issue they need to resolve. They need to focus on that Taiwan problem. So, I don't
Yeah.
think they're going to be kind of wasting resources in other countries. So,
I mean,
uh,
to be quite cynical, uh,
yeah.
from the China's Peking policy, it wouldn't be that bad if United States got involved in a war.
Oh yeah, exactly. I
It,
think
it,
like
it-
I think the from Xi's perspective, he may be like victory lapping at home. Like when if US kind of get pulled into the Mid Eastern situation again, which they try to get out of, like in Obama administration, it will be a really blessing to the Chinese government because they can now concentrate on how to solve the Taiwan issue.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because like if really US government is stupid enough to occupy Iran, it's going to be a nightmare and it's going to create a lot of issues kind of in the coming decades. And China
yeah.
was definitely going to benefit from that situation. Yeah. So I have some questions from the young scholars. So if the Chinese readers could draw one principal lesson from your body of work and this conversation, what would you most like it to be?
Well, I would say, I think in politics in the 21st century, the notion and feeling of uh, nationalism, patriotism, however you want to describe it, is still a very important factor.
Hmm.
And people used to, during the globalization era, think that, well, that's 19th century concepts,
Hmm.
that one can ignore that. But I think for understanding international politics, we have to be aware that there are uh, uh, real national sentiments
Hmm.
that have to be taken into account. It's not just over basically Iran's foreign policy. If you look at Russian foreign policy,
Hmm.
I think anyone who'd taken 101 in international relations would have predicted that NATO expansion into Eastern Europe all the way to uh, Moscow was sooner or later would create a crisis.
Yeah, I gotta
Uh,
see that coming.
so
Yeah.
you didn't have to be a genius. In fact, most American experts on Russia, both former ambassadors, State Department officials, academics,
Hmm.
who knew anything about Russian history, kept on warning presidents that don't expand NATO into rush towards Russia.
Hmm.
There'll be crisis. And every president consistently actually expanded
Yeah.
into. So sooner or later, there was going to be a crisis in Ukraine. Not
Yeah.
necessarily the way Putin did it, but even if it was a nice liberal president of Russia, they would have had to, for nationalistic reasons, have to react to
Yeah.
American missiles based in on their doorstep.
Yeah, just think about the Cuba missile crisis, right? Like nobody wants the other country put missiles in front of your doorstep and then like easily shooting to your location. So I think that's like a very understandable and a common reactions that Russian
Yeah.
government right now is taking that kind of stance, you know. So, what guidance would you offer young students or historians eager to research the contemporary Iran today? What underexplored themes of questions mostly urgents need some fresh investigation? You can see this question is definitely from someone who studied history. Like,
Yeah. Uh, well, I mean, what actually a lot of people are studying now is the entry of women into politics and
Mhm.
their role, both present and past. How this fits into the internal politics of the country.
Mhm.
The women issue, I would say.
Women issue. Yeah, I think that's really interesting because there's a lot of women in Iran got educated, and then they definitely need more human rights, right? Like as they get more educated, they have more desire for you know liberal policies. So that's definitely some interesting topic, and that create tension as well in the society.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Professor, really thank you for your time. And I have one last question. I'm just curious. Like, I know you criticize the Iran government. Have you ever been back to the to Iran country like recently or after
Uh,
different regimes? Can you do that?
I have not risked it. Uh, people might read my materials, but the intelligence services also have an unhealthy interest in history, so
Yeah.
they read very carefully, and they can always say, "Oh, you insulted or you blasphemed our great leader Khomeini or uh,
Yeah.
Khamenei," and I don't want to be in a position to have to basically recant what I've already written.
Yeah. So you basically you can now go back, right?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, yeah. That's always good to know because that's my guess as well. I'm just curious, like for intellectuals like you with such a high prestige positions in US, I'm kind of interested in what they think about your situation. I think it's similar to some of the scholars left China. They write about the Chinese history if they want to go back, if their book is not like freely dispersed in distributed in China, that could be a problem. And
Yeah,
then if you say something bad about the great leader, the supreme leader, you're gonna be in trouble, and you could
yeah.
be, facing some consequences. But it's really informative talk, and I think my audience will really like your conversation. I will make more videos about your book, introducing it to a wider audience, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your good questions.